Hello, YouTube friends. My name is Constance, and this is Cruelty-Free Musings. Welcome to Serious Talk Tuesday, where we are going to be talking about what cruelty-free is, what drugstore brands are cruelty-free, and my personal take on the 1530 challenge, which I will link an explanatory video on the 1530 challenge from Georgia Harris up here in this corner. So let's begin. People who call themselves cruelty-free have decided that they are going to not support companies that test on animals. And the usual definition of cruelty-free as it pertains to beauty specifically is that the ingredients, the finished products themselves are not tested on animals, and the individual ingredients are not tested on animals by the suppliers. So some companies are a little dodgy and they might say, well, our product is not tested on animals, but they don't care whether their suppliers test on animals. And then there is the issue of whether a brand sells in China, because China doesn't require brands to test their products on animals, but every product that enters China, every beauty-related product, I don't know about anything else, but every beauty-related makeup, skincare item that enters China for sale has a chance of being randomly selected to be the one that is tested on animals, to make sure that they're not importing, random hazardous products, and that they're not, letting their consumers buy, things that would be harmful if they put them on their skin. Which, I can appreciate. This regulation exists in China to, as a means to protect consumers. Nothing wrong with that. However, the problem with the issue that Western consumers have with animal testing as far as cosmetics and skincare is that it's not necessary. So there's a lot of. It used to be standard practice to test on animals, to test everything on animals, but the conclusion, not only in the US, but also in the EU, is that there is no reason to test cosmetic and beauty products on animals, because you're not actually screening for anything that you wouldn't catch in a human trial, and the human trial effects are not worse than torturing an animal to see if there's a reaction. So any brand that chooses to sell their products in China is generally considered not to be cruelty-free based on the standard definition of cruelty. Brands tend to not operate on their own power. So the company, there's a massive umbrella company that owns Sephora, and that brand also owns a bunch of other brands that are usually sold exclusively in Sephora because they don't like cannibalizing their market. This includes, I believe, Fenty Beauty, definitely Kat Von D. So there's a bunch of associated brands lumped under what is called a parent company. So there can be cruelty-free brands that are owned by non-cruelty-free parent companies. This is the case with Kat Von D. Kat Von D is owned by technically they're not owned directly by a company that tests on animals. However, the company that owns them also owns brands that are not cruelty-free. such as Sephora. Again, Sephora is not cruelty-free because there is a Sephora China. Sephora products are all tested on animals because they sell them in China. All right. So some people consider that no cruelty-free brand is actually cruelty-free unless they're not owned by another cruelty-free entity. So, like, NYX is owned by L'Oreal. Some people would not consider NYX to be cruelty-free, even though they are generally considered to be cruelty-free because they are owned by L'Oreal, which sells in China, tests on animals, etc., etc., etc. So, this is what I'm saying. There are different layers for cruelty-free. In general, the standard definition and the one that I go by is they're not cruelty-free if they sell in China, if their finished products are tested on animals, if any of their ingredients are tested on animals, and they can be cruelty-free and owned by a non-cruelty-free parent corporation. Another example is Too Faced is owned by Estee Lauder, which sells in China. Too Faced is not. All right. So, because I do include the suppliers in my definition of cruelty-free, that means that there are some brands that I don't consider cruelty-free or that I consider questionable enough to not buy their things. So, for example, Inglot is considered cruelty-free by many cruelty-free beauty bloggers, including one that I refer to and highly respect. That would be Fira, Courtney of Fira.net. She has Inglot on her cruelty-free list, but Logical Harmony has Inglot on a brands to avoid list because they don't ask their suppliers to make sure that their suppliers are supplying cruelty-free ingredients. So, because of my definition, I don't always... my view of cruelty-free is a little more restricted than some other people's. It's a little broader than some other people's again. With that in mind, let's talk about some resources that I use to determine whether or not a brand is cruelty-free. One of the easiest ways to determine that a brand is cruelty-free or not cruelty-free is to just send them an email and ask some questions. I have never done this, actually. It's because these other resources are so great, and they mostly agree with each other. So I can come to a conclusion without actually having to interact with humans at all, even by email. Sounds beneficial to me. So, my primary source, as I have mentioned in the past, as I mentioned in my introduction to my channel, my primary source is Logical Harmony. LogicalHarmony.net is run by Tashina Combs, and she is so extensive that to be listed as cruelty-free on her website is a certification and is basically equivalent, in my opinion, to being, like, definitely at least PETA certified, and probably closer to Leaping Bunny certified. Those are the two organizations that monitor cruelty-free status in the U.S. So, Logical Harmony basically certifies brands, as cruelty-free. She has a very extensive list of questions, which she kind of keeps them secret. Like, it's clear that her general list of requirements aligns with what I mentioned before. But her exact list of questions basically is a certification test. If Tashina of Logical Harmony says that you are cruelty-free as a brand, it means something. And something that I think is fantastic is that most of the indie brands in the world are cruelty-free and are certified on Logical Harmony. So that's cool. The second source, which I encountered through her interview with Jen Loves Reviews, is Courtney of Fira.net. I will link the video that Jen did with Courtney up here in the cards, and I will also have all of these ladies linked below. She described, she goes into a lot of detail in that video about what she considers to be cruelty-free and why she doesn't consider, like, whether an ingredient has been tested in the past when considering whether or not a brand is called cruelty-free. Because I will let her explain that. Anyway, so Logical Harmony and Fira.net are the two primary sources for me. Because of Courtney from Fira.net, I was introduced to My Beauty Bunny. And the cool thing about these three resources, these three cruelty-free beauty bloggers, that they all maintain a specific and fairly comprehensive list of brands that they personally define as cruelty-free, which is fantastic. It's a great resource for the rest of us who are lazy. So I discovered her through Courtney because Courtney mentioned that she and Tashina and I think her name is Jen, the cruelty-free blogger behind Beauty Bunny, they all talk and they compare notes, and their lists even are not perfectly in sync because they again have slightly different definitions of cruelty-free. And for example, Inglot shows up as a cruelty-free brand on Fira.net, but not as a cruelty-free brand on Logical Harmony. But overall, they agree to a tremendous degree, and they cover kind of different bases. They're like, so Courtney of Fira.net is more in the like in the goth kind of spectrum. She does a lot of she's also very fair, so she does pale skin beauty, which is clearly relevant to me. I spend a lot of time on her website because of that. And then Tashina is not only cruelty-free but also vegan, so she has massive lists for vegan bloggers. And then My Beauty Bunny is more along the lines of like a traditional lifestyle beauty blogger based in LA. I think there's an asterisk by everything that I say about My Beauty Bunny because I haven't spent a ton of time on her site, just enough to know that I love it as a reference for cross-checking for the other two. One of the great things about having three different resources to refer to about cruelty-free beauty is that they will all focus on different things. They'll all encounter different brands. So if I can't find a brand on Logical Harmony or Fira.net, logicalharmony.net or Fira.net, then I can go to My Beauty Bunny and she might have it. Alright. So, let's now get on to the meat of the matter. Alright. So, at the beginning of this year, Tarte released a foundation called the Shape Tape Foundation, and there was a massive, massive outcry over the shade range, or the lack of shade range. So they released 2 foundations at the same time, and they released, I think, 14 foundations in each. And there's a big thing. If you search Tarte Shape Tape Foundation, you can easily find a reference about this. There's a massive reaction log on the internet of people being shocked that there are, out of these 14 shades, 11 shades catering to fair to like light medium, and then there's 3 shades for medium to dark, which is pretty terrible. Anyway, because of this debacle, a few people on the internet took a look at their collections and they were like, hey, maybe I should think a little bit more about the kinds of complexion products that I'm featuring on my channel, so that maybe if the people that come to my channel for advice and recommendations are of a different skin tone than me, that maybe they can go to this, go and search out this complexion product and be reasonably confident that they can find a match. And this is, in a nutshell, the 1530 challenge. It's a brand, in order to be inclusive shade range wise, typically has 15 concealers and 30 shades in their foundation. So my problem with that as a cruelty-free beauty person is that there are not that many cruelty-free brands that actually have that many shades. Like, in the drugstore, it's NYX. In Sephora, it's Cover FX, Kat Von D, and Fenty Beauty. And of those 3, only one of them has a dewy-skinned or demi-matte alternative, which is the finish that I prefer when I wear foundation at all, which, as we all know, is not all the time. So, I have, as part of my cruelty-free drugstore brand roundup, I have included a little division into brands that I will buy and brands that I won't buy. So there are 6 brands on my cruelty-free drugstore brands that I will buy, and 3 on my cruelty-free drugstore brands that I will not buy, because the shade range is actually atrocious. So, let's hop into things. Oh, and part of this is also that I am actually one of the discriminated against if I am not able to find a shade that matches me in your complexion products. What's the point in me buying any of your things? Such is the fate of being porcelain to alabaster, depending on the season. Alright, so to begin at the top, Milani is a cruelty-free drugstore brand. They have a very popular, like hyped up foundation that when it was released did not have a foundation shade that was anything remotely suitable for my skin tone. They did have a relatively large foundation shade range, but it was more of the like light to medium tan sort of range. They've recently expanded it. They've added 3 light shades, which is good. They didn't even have like a fair option, never mind a porcelain option. So they've added 3 light shades and only 1 dark shade, which I'm not super enchanted by, but it could be worse, and their dark shade is legitimately dark. And even though I am not likely to ever buy Milani Conceal and Perfect, I appreciate that they went to the trouble of genuinely attempting to cater to my skin tone. Unlike some brands that we'll talk about later. And not only my end of the spectrum, but the opposite as well. Like, I will say, the jump at the bottom of the Milani Conceal and Perfect shade range is not fantastic. It's a little bit, okay, we went from medium tan to pretty dark. But I definitely appreciate that this is a brand that has a dark foundation at all. And it's a drugstore foundation. And it's by most accounts, it's a full coverage foundation, which is, it's what a lot of people are looking for in foundation. It's not what I'm looking for, but I appreciate that they're catering to the majority and not to me. The only picture that I could find of the shade range is not the whole shade range, because they have the awkward number of 19 shades. I think it's missing out to the 2 lightest shades, but it does have the darkest shade, something like that. It might be missing the 3 lightest shades. But anyway, this is a drugstore foundation that has a solid shade range. It could be better, but, solid. It's cruelty-free. It's a good foundation. And their other stuff is also good. I have bought stuff from Milani before. I bought an eyeliner which was not good for my particular eyes and skin chemistry, but I can see it being good for someone in some lifetime, and it did not put me off wanting to buy Milani ever again. The next brand is the classic drugstore, release everything brand. It is NYX. NYX has the problem that if you want to actually find something good, you have to sift through a bunch of random releases that are not particularly good. But if you're willing to take on the pain of attempting to find a bunch of, trying out a bunch of things before you find anything that works at all, the products that work well once you find a formula that works for you, it's a case pretty much across the board of buy it in every color. Like, I haven't loved everything that I've bought from NYX. Overall, their lip products are very comfortable. They have the best lip gloss that I have ever tried. That would be the Butter Gloss. I have not tried the Butter Gloss Intense, but if the extra pigmentation didn't mess with the formula, I'm not opposed. So I have the NYX Butter Glosses. I have a NYX Jumbo Eye Pencil. And I have a NYX Gel Eyeliner which I have to set with shadow because my eyes and hooded and oily and but that's not the gel liner's fault. I'm pretty sure that any gel liner would have that problem. Pretty sure they all have in the past. Next up we have Burt's Bees. Burt's Bees has made lip balms and colored lip balms for as long as I can remember. One of my staples in high school was was one of the skinny colored lip crayons, and I think it was Raisin. It was a little too dark for me to wear without any other makeup, but I wore it anyway. They've had good lip formulas forever and ever. They've had nice lotions. Their scents are on point. They recently, like last year, released makeup, which some of it is bad, and some of it is pretty good. I have the foundation, and I do enjoy it. I had to work a little harder, maybe, than some other foundations to make it work. But over like a smoothing primer, it's great. And I've also heard good things about the blushes. So that is a brand that I would not be opposed to trying more of, especially since the lightest shade is light enough for me. Good job, Burt's Bees. Work on that deeper end, though. 'Cause, you know, it's abysmal. All across the drugstore. NYX is the only drugstore brand that has a reasonable dark end of the spectrum. Oh, to finish up what I was saying about NYX, NYX has a reputation for being extremely hit and miss with products, so like even though they have fantastic shade ranges in like 3 foundations, they're not all good foundations. They can be pretty difficult to make work. So, you know, take it with a grain of salt, but they do have a fantastic line of foundation mixers, so if you need to pick up something, you know, to pick up a whitener, an oliver, something to make the undertone of your foundation olive instead of pink or yellow. They have a warmth mixer. They have I think they have a darkening drop. You know, that's just for adjusting foundations deeper, not necessarily adjusting their warmth. And they also have some like radiance mixed in. They have like 8 different they have 8 different foundation mixers in their Pro Foundation Mixer line. So if you can find a NYX foundation that works for you, you can make it the correct shade with their foundation mixers, which is fantastic. So the next drugstore brand on my brands that I'm willing to buy is Wet n Wild. They're one of those drugstore brands that is extremely consistent. Nothing that I've tried from Wet n Wild has been terrible. There's stuff that's not as good as high-end, and then there's stuff that is as good as high-end. But none of it is, like, super trash level. So I really appreciate that about Wet n Wild. They're another one of those brands that has a foundation that I wouldn't wear the foundation, but they have a shade for me, so that's good. That's nice. And they have They have a reasonable shade range, I think. It could be deeper. It could go to the deeper end of the spectrum. But it could be worse. It could be some of the brands that we're talking about in the I'm not gonna buy these brands section. Last brand on the cruelty-free drugstore brands that I will actually buy section is Physicians Formula. Now, this is not particularly a surprise that I will buy them. After all, the Butter Bronzer is my only bronzer right now. I own it. If you look at my description box, it's in pretty much every video. Every makeup look pretty much that I do, it's, adding a little bit of shape to my face, a little bit of warmth to the perimeter. I really like the Butter Bronzer. I enjoy that it's a bronzer that's light enough for me, and I don't hate the scent. It's a little strong when you're putting it on your face. It's like, wow, this really smells a lot like coconuts. It definitely smells very, very strongly of possibly artificial coconuts. But it's not terrible, and I do enjoy the effect of the bronzer, and the smell doesn't stick around, so that's good. They recently... Now, Physicians Formula, you might be surprised by this being on the list. Based on what I have said previously about complexion products, because Physicians Formula does not have a great history as far as diversity in their complexion products. In fact, I will go so far as to say they are abysmal on both ends of the spectrum. Like, their lightest shade doesn't go light enough for me, their darkest shade doesn't go anywhere near anyone that's not pretty heavily Caucasian. So, Physicians Formula is a little of an interesting choice for this section of 15, the cruelty-free 1530 challenge take. But they recently released a foundation, which is... okay, it's only 12 shades. It's nothing like the 30 shades that one theoretically ought to aim for the 1530 foundation. I apologize for the air conditioning noise. It's summer. To carry on, Physicians Formula recently released the Healthy Foundation, which doesn't have the greatest number of shades, but it is surprisingly evenly distributed. Like, it's not 75% light and light medium. It's 4 shades light, 4 shades medium, 4 shades tan, and 4 shades deep. And it can go both deeper and lighter. But I've heard from YouTubers of a complexion not that different from mine that that the lightest shade, LC1, works for them. And that it genuinely has a cool undertone. Both of which things are quite promising, honestly. So, Physicians Formula, I will give you an A for effort, and thank you, as one of the ignored, thank you for paying attention to the pale people. And the chocolate people. And thank you for making an attempt to balance your shade range. I will say that I don't think it's theoretically, the shade range is theoretically divided into cool, warm, and medium undertones. I would take that with a grain of salt because it does seem to increase steadily in depth from LC1 to LN4. So even though you might think, oh, I have a neutral undertone, I should go for, I have a neutral undertone and I'm light, but, I'm light rather than medium. You might think, oh, I should go for LN3. Not necessarily. Consider the depth, because apparently the undertones are not exactly what you might think. Alright, now moving on to the brands that I personally choose not to support. First one of those is Catrice. Catrice has a really, they had a foundation which was really talked about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, because people were like, oh, the finish is just like the Fenty Beauty foundation, that's Rihanna's brand. And, people were like, this is great, this is just like Fenty Beauty, it's fantastic. There are 4 shades. 4. Fenty Beauty, 40. Catrice, 4. And not distributed at all evenly, no. 4 shades of darker than me, but lighter than someone who is even faintly tan. Yeah, I don't understand brands that do that. I mean, I do kind of, because I say this in the utmost of a kind spirit. Yeah, no, I'm not going to say that. All right. The majority of people who buy drugstore makeup are Caucasian descent, develop a tan in the summer, whatever. So they're definitely, aiming at the majority. And they're aiming at the things that will sell and turn over quickly, because they're not only a drugstore brand, they're an extremely affordable drugstore brand, not quite as low priced in general as Wet n Wild or Essence, but very affordable brand. So they want their products that they put on shelves to turn over quickly so that they can keep making the money. So I understand it from a financial perspective. At the same time, 4 shades that look the same. And they also have a concealer, which some beauty bloggers have said, oh, this is better than the ultimate sensation of 2016 and 2017, which would be the Tarte Shape Tape Concealer. That one comes in 3 shades. And honestly, when you consider that concealers generally have less of a shade range than foundations do, this is a terrible ratio. At least 6 foundations for 3 concealers. No? No. Alright. So, yeah. I don't care how good the rest of Catrice brand is. I'm not gonna give my money to a brand which is not only oblivious to my skin tone, they're oblivious to the majority of the United States. Like, anyone that might conceivably be considered a minority skin color, just, like, ignored. I'm not in favor. And the same thing for Essence. They have extremely cheap products. They don't spend any money on the packaging or on the marketing. They just produce a lot of things very quickly, and again, the same problem. They're targeting the section of the population that spends the most money on foundation, and the portion of the population that is as standard Caucasian as you can get. Like, very, very typical, middle of the road, light to maybe a medium. So yeah, this is their foundation. Guess those are 4 different shades. Yeah. I have bought a few things from Essence. I haven't been impressed with any of the things that I personally bought. I think it was just a mascara. Yes. I have only bought a mascara, which honestly I am insanely picky when it comes to mascara because they all flake on me. So, like, every mascara, including the ones that are said not to flake, they all flake on me. Or worse, they smudge. So I have bought one thing from Essence and will not ever buy anything again. Certainly not until they acknowledge my existence with a complexion product. Or acknowledge the existence of the deeper end of the minority spectrum. Hispanic, African American, and, down to the ebony skin. Come on. Waiting. At least acknowledge my existence. Come on. Alright, and then The Last Offender. The Last Offender. I have never bought anything from this brand, which I'm actually faintly astonished by. No, that's actually not true. I owned a lip scrub from them once. I actually like the lip scrub, but I did get rid of it before I had gone through it. I don't know why. It was just like a casualty and decluttering, and like I knew that I didn't want it. I wanted the space more than the thing, but I don't know why I wanted the space more than the thing. The final brand on this miniature list of brands that I will not buy is e.l.f. This is a brand, E.L.F. Used to be, this brand used to be explicitly named Eyes, Lips, Face. They shortened it. It's now e.l.f. Their complexion products selection is awful. Their best foundation has 7 shades. The one that I found has 6. There are others, which you can easily find through browsing Ulta. There are others that have 4 and 3. I picked this particular foundation because I watched Thrifty Beauty. She owns this foundation in the fairest shade Porcelain. And I looked at it on her and I was like, there is no way that will work for me. And in a recent video, she said, you know, I have recently discovered that this is too dark for me. So, okay. Here's this foundation, which is named Porcelain, that people who are actually of a porcelain complexion cannot wear. In fact, if I were just comparing this bottle of porcelain to other foundations from other random brands, I would probably say that it was like a natural beige or a buff or something like that. Something that I would instantly look at and go, ha, no, not in a million years is that my skin tone. I am definitely a porcelain skin tone. I have the same problem with Becca. Porcelain is not the lightest shade in their foundation range. So, open letter to brands. Naming your lightest shade porcelain does not make it porcelain. At least try a little bit to make it fair. Look, I don't care if you don't have a porcelain shade, but when I see porcelain on a bottle, I'm like, oh, that should match me. Oh, that's not gonna match me. Which is the wrong thing to do to your customers. Don't do that to your customers. False expectations are really bad. Alright, so this has been my summary of cruelty-free brands in the drugstore. What brands I will buy, what brands I won't. I hope you enjoyed or learned something. Like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you feel like. And goodbye for now.